Exercise 2 of chemical reactions is reactions in solution. And what the in solution mean is that all the chemicals you'll be reacting are dissolved in water. So they're all in these pipettes. So the very first thing that HOL wants you to do is it wants you to observe the appearance of the chemicals before they react while they're still in their pipettes. So if we look at the data table, here, this first little space or box here is for you to write in what each chemical looks like. And they've written what they expect you to write. So for this first reaction, you write the formula, NaHCl3, and then that is a clear colorless liquid. And then HCl, same thing, clear colorless liquid. Now for number 2 and number 3, you're required to use a blue dye, and you may have thrown that out with last week's experiment. When I looked at the materials, I did not look at this carefully enough. So if you don't have the blue dye, just write don't have the blue dye in both of these. You can also use blue food coloring if you happen to have it, but if you don't, you can just explain why you are not able to do that experiment here. So that's the first thing you're going to do is just look at the appearance of the chemicals in the pipettes, and most of them are actually going to be clear colorless liquid. All right, then the next thing that you want to do is you want to label your wells. So the easiest way to do this is place your well on a piece of paper and label the rows by letters A, B, C, D, etc., and label the columns by numbers. And that way you will have a way to identify which reaction is occurring in which well, and you'll record that where it says well ID. All right, once you're ready to get started with the chemical reactions, you want to wear your gloves and your eye protection and use scissors to cut the tip of each pipette. And then you're going to mix the chemicals, and you will look for observations as soon as you add the chemicals together, as well as after they've sat there for about an hour. So 5 drops of sodium bicarbonate and 5 drops of HCl. Stir with a clean toothpick thoroughly and watch very, very carefully. As I said, if there are any bubbles, they're going to be really, really small. So you have to look very carefully to see if there are any visible evidence of a chemical reaction. So as soon as you add the drops together, you observe the reaction. If there are anything to record, then you'll say immediately, and write immediate, colon, what happens. And then here, they've actually already filled this out for you for the first one. Bubbles form in a clear colorless solution. And then after 1 hour, it will be clear liquid with no bubbles. So look for those bubbles, and if they're really tiny, then you sort of know what to expect for other reactions that may evolve bubbles or a gas. So if 3 reactants are listed, record the separate immediate observation for each chemical addition. So what they mean by that is here we have NaOCl or sodium hypochlorite plus Ki or potassium iodide plus starch. So when you add the sodium hypochlorite and the potassium iodide together, write an observation. And then when you add the starch to it, then write another observation. So same thing for number 3. If you have your blue dye, write what you see when you add the blue dye to the sodium hypochlorite, and then what happens when you add the HCl, or hydrochloric acid. So you will do that for all of the chemical reactions that are listed there, and you'll let them sit for about an hour, and then an hour later come back and see if there's any difference. Now, you will have to answer exercise 2, questions 1, and not 2, not 3, but number 4. And so a precipitate is a reaction that forms a solid. And so if you see something that looks milky or something that settles to the bottom, or little bits, very, very tiny bits that are floating in the solution, or anything that looks opaque, that's going to be a precipitate. It doesn't really look like a solid because the particles are going to be super, super tiny. And then number 5. So answer all the questions except for 2 and 3. And do remember that you need to upload a photo of your well as well as a photo of your aluminum foil as part of your lab report.